Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Online Warriors podcast, the first full-length, feature-length episode of the year 2025. I'm Illeagle 86. I am joined, as always, by my good friends Techtic and Nerdbomber.
Heyo.
We haven't gotten into they're here. We haven't gotten into New Year's resolutions. We haven't talked about them much. I think we tend to talk about them every year. I'm going to talk about them, but in a little bit of a different way here. My wife's sister-in-law. So I guess how is that person related to me? Are they also my sister-in-law? How does that work? Do we know?
No.
Are they just not related to me at all? Because I'm okay with that. Okay, well, shout out to her. She's doing what is probably very common on like Pinterest or whatever. It's just like 2025 bingo, where you, instead of having one New Year's resolution that's like very large and monolithic, you have like 24 little guys and a free space. And then you just you randomly arrange them and you try to get a bingo.
What do I get in hand if I get a bingo?
Just, I don't know, pride, a sense of accomplishment.
That's
it? And feeling that you've bettered yourself. I don't know, I feel like it's a pretty good reward. If you wanted to really spice things up for yourself, you could like buy yourself something that you want. And then if you get a bingo, you get that thing. But I don't know if I want to dangle in front of myself like that. That seems weird.
I don't want to dangle in front of myself like that either.
I want to dangle in front of myself.
Where I'm going with this is I was like, oh, that sounds fun. I'm going to do that. And I don't know, like maybe I'm just not a very goal-driven person. Coming up with 24 goals of things to do or accomplish, even over the time scale of a year, I have 18 and I'm struggling with the last 6. It's kind of challenging to do.
Oh, that's so easy though. Okay, here's one right off the bat. Eat a new ice cream flavor.
Tell someone to go fuck themselves.
I also want both great suggestions. I also want the things to be suitably meaningful, even on a micro scale. I want them to be things that I actually want to do. Right?
Okay, learn how to cook a new dish that's healthy.
Tell someone to go fuck themselves while eating an ice cream cone.
You're good. I feel like you're both getting warmer. This is something. To be clear, I wasn't looking for feedback. Let me just say that.
To be clear, I'm providing feedback, so you're welcome.
That much is certainly clear. So I'm constructing my bingo board for 2025. I don't know that that's something I'm going to share or not. That feels like maybe a vlog situation at some point. I don't really know. But that's how I'm handling New Year's resolutions this year. I know I've talked in the past about how New Year's resolutions are kind of, as an institution, vaguely toxic in the sense that it causes people to like localize their self-improvement around a specific time on the calendar.
My New Year's resolution is to not hope for anything.
Well, I don't think...
Not hope for... That's very different than what I said. Hope is always a good thing.
Self-improvement is a good thing. However, I think that as a species, as a creature, winter is time to hibernate and time to be restful. And unless you're living in a place where it's cold all year round, like our bodies naturally kind of go into a more restful state in the winter. So I think it's a recipe for failure. And I know we've done episodes in prior years where we talk about New Year's resolutions and whatnot, but I really do feel like there is some like bad, like you said, toxicity around setting yourself up to fail in January after the holidays, getting back into the swing of things at your job, being stressed. You're never going to hit your goals. And I say never, but like, I think, what was the statistic? I read it recently. It was something like 80% of people who set New Year's resolutions don't actually do them or see them through. And of that percentage, like something whopping like 60% of them never even start the resolution.
Well, that's like, but I think... And yeah, like you said, we've talked about it in past years. We're evolving our understanding of New Year's resolutions as a social institution. I think we're going in the right direction with it. I think the bingo board thing, because like to give you an example, like there are a couple of squares on my bingo board that are like, do this thing that I can't possibly do until the summer when the weather is good. Like I think simply by having so many, I guess you could call them micro goals, they naturally can be stratified throughout the year in a way that is probably a lot more wholesome and also more attainable than like setting one goal of like, I'm going to start going to the gym again in January 2nd. And then you go and like everyone's there. Like that, I think that's canceled. I think that's tired. So, I don't know. Hopefully this helped the listeners figure out what they want to do with New Year's resolutions or just not make New Year's resolutions.
Yeah.
Techtic has resolved to apparently not have hope. Is that what you said?
Correct.
Just don't hope
Don't
for
hope
anything?
for anything. Just like whatever happens, live in the now and just enjoy yourself.
It just sounds dark to me. I mean, I get the premise. And if anything, it's probably healthy, but...
I think the
it
verbiage
sounds
is weird, but the intent is good.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Don't
We're gonna be
let
talking-
society let you down. Is that better?
You know, I will say this was not really a resolution, but I did do one thing in the new year that I said I was going to do last year, and I made die-cut stickers, which sounds stupid, but I have a Cricut, and I guess this is just a little tidbit for the viewers. I know this is typically what are you up to, but I made a little sticker of my puppy.
I resolved in 2024, in a way, I resolved to watch Hawkeye because that was the punishment that was bestowed upon me by losing the quiz. And this is also kind of my mini what are you up to. We're turning the episode on its head, but I finished it.
And
So,
you
like,
loved it.
I did follow through on the punishment, and I finished it like a few days late. If we have an entire year to do the punishment, I was only delinquent by a couple of days. So, like, cut me some slack. Again, it was fun. I think I talked about this on the last episode, like where because I had started it at that point. I watched the last episode today, and it's kind of what you think it's going to be, like I said, and that's not a bad thing. It's just like, it was great workout entertainment. It's great to like watch a scene, do some push-ups, listen to what they're saying while you're doing push-ups, and then, do some crunches. The show is still happening. Like, it was a nice little, that was the right way to watch it. And then when I was done working out, I would just sit there and watch the last like half an hour or whatever, however much of the episode was left. Recommend doing that. But yeah, that part of my life is over. I don't know that I'll ever watch it again or rewatch it, but it was fine. As punishments go, like I think I said last week, dramatically less punishing than Book of Boba Fett was. That felt like, I don't even know what it felt like. It didn't feel good. So
Now, not
that's a
to
mini
derail
review.
and keep going in the trivia topic, did we ever dole out a punishment to our dear pal Techtic over here?
Now the Patreon's got to do it.
That's to be decided. I do think we should give the Patreons a few options, multiple choice style, but that is TBD at this time. We'll wipe the slate clean today. I will host the first quiz today, and we're just blank slating this thing. We're just straight up, just all back to 0 and 0. But Techtic did finish in last. I can go through the numbers if you want them, but they're not particularly salacious. It's just Techtic came in last.
That's because I never finish first.
Okay, gross. Let's get into the meat of the episode here. Let's talk about. I'm not even going to say what the topics are, because if I say what the topics are, then people might be inclined to click away. And no, I got you right where I want you. We're going to go one topic at a time, and we're going to start with a movie trailer. We got a trailer last week, for a movie called Love Me, which, let me just say, not a good title. We're going to get into what I thought was great about this in a second, but this is a movie that I think in some respect, according to, the internet at least, this movie has already come out because it has a 2024 date on it. I think it gets a wide release later this month, January 31st, 2025. This movie, so we got the trailer for it. Basically, Stephen Yeun and Kristen Stewart, first of all, both fantastic actors. I think there's a lot of people who like to muckrake against Kristen Stewart because she happened to get her start with Twilight, which in a sense is fair, but also she's done a lot of really interesting things since then and has kind of proven her mettle as an actress. But anyways,
I agree.
Two great accomplished
Case 2.
performers, just kind of trading haymakers here in a movie that, as far as you can really tell, only substantively stars them. And this is a movie that takes place after the end of human civilization, or so it would appear. And human civilization only continues to exist via a digital footprint. The example that shows up a lot in the trailers appears to be YouTube videos. And there's a satellite and a buoy on Earth, both of which appear to be robotic, that essentially start communicating. And it appears, it gets a little vague at this point, but it appears that they decide to fabricate entirely in cyberspace a quasi-human existence or coexistence
In the metaverse.
and I guess you could say in the metaverse.
Oh, this is Facebook?
I don't know that it's Facebook. There's no mention of Facebook. I think this is a very, very interesting concept for a movie. I think it's a very interesting way to shoot a movie. The movie that I thought of when I was watching this, the trailer for this, was a movie called Searching, which if you haven't seen it, it's a movie about a father searching for his missing child, but the movie takes place entirely on computer screens. That is like the kind of quote unquote gimmick of the movie, where like the plot unfolds via like, you know, iMessages and watching YouTube videos and like Google Maps and like stuff like that, which is a very interesting way to kind of shoot a movie and use a visual language. This movie, I think, is going to do a lot of similar things. We see animation at various points in this movie. We see, of course, live action performance from the two leads, but we also see two satellites talking and also seemingly conversing through like, hey, here's a web page. I find that fascinating. The last thing I'll say before I turn it over to you guys is, according to Google, it's 1 hour and 32 minutes. And as you know, to me, that's just chef's kiss. Love the crap out of that detail. Nerdbomber, you were the one who wanted to talk about this. So I guess what, if you could only pick one thing, or you could pick many things, what drew you in here?
Honestly, this kind of, to me, seemed like the Wall-E and Eve story if you take out the ship of humans.
That was the worst part.
I don't know if I agree with that. But it basically is like the Wall-E and Eve love story, but they've extended it. They've made it a more adult love story. And I don't know. I always have a soft spot for Wall-E and Eve, and I really like these two actors. I think it's a unique premise. I feel like we've had movies actually pop up in the last, probably since the post-pandemic times, where it's a movie centered around a very small cast of actors. But I think it's very unique to only have two people in an entire movie. And
yeah,
especially, honestly, so I saw a teaser for the trailer before actually seeing the trailer. It was like a little 15-second teaser that I think showed up on Instagram. And that initial teaser almost made it seem like a horror movie, because it just seemed like two vloggers who were AI vloggers. Because like the way that they set the little like short teaser up was just opening that like segment of vlogs where I don't remember what she says, but it's their couple tagline. And it almost seemed like it was going to be a horror movie about the dangers of like vlogging and AI and influencers. But then when I saw the full trailer, I was like, this is actually really wholesome seeming. I mean, obviously a bleak future where like these two, like the buoy and the satellite are the only two things left.
Yeah.
But also somewhat uplifting and I would say almost wholesome look at what it means to be human, which I feel like in a day and age of being inundated with AI, maybe we need something like that.
Well, yeah, it seems like, my understanding, again, the trailer was a little vague on this point, but like, it's almost like they learn about human existence via these two vloggers who did exist while humans existed, and then they essentially decide to take on the identities of those two people and, again, craft like some kind of cyberspace reality in which they live. This trailer does deal in a lot of like, you know, the words flash across the screen saying things like, this will cause you to ponder your own existence within the universe and like the meaning of life and love. And like, I will say that's pretty intense. Like when I first saw those words, I was like, I don't even know if I want to do that. Like, that might be too powerful for me.
How long do you think the movie takes place if this were real? Do you understand what I'm asking?
I don't understand what you're asking.
The interaction between these two robots and the life they create and simulate, what do you think the runtime of that whole thing is?
Oh, you're saying that theoretically.
Do you think it's
you're saying
like
theoretically they could run the course of it in like a second? Is that what you were saying?
Do you think they poke at that? I hope they do.
Two different types of computers. Haven't they shown like they've pitted two different AI brains, I'll say, against each other, giving them different languages, different backgrounds, and it really doesn't take them all that long to get to their own language. I can't remember what it was. I remember people were freaking out about it though. There was like a headline all over the place where it's like, AIs have created their own language and they're plotting against humanity. Do you remember that?
I do. It was very clickbaity.
Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly sounds that way. It's an interesting question, Techtic. I don't really know the extent to which they'll touch on that. What I will say about this movie too, again, looking at the kind of Google landing page for it, again, this movie has already been out for a while. It has a fairly dense Rotten Tomatoes, there's been 51 reviews on it. Aggressively middling, 47%. Now, as someone who tends to take Rotten Tomatoes scores pretty seriously, I do not take this one seriously, like, at all. Because I think this could very well be a movie that's so sufficiently high concept that you kind of either get it or you don't. And just by me saying that, either you get it or you don't, to me, without reading the reviews, it's like, all right, half of them got it, half of them didn't, right? I mean, it's also probably a movie that you can take away from it what you want to take away from it. And, you know, a sci-fi romance that's an hour and a half long, I'll be able to take something away from it. I can't guarantee it's going to be earth-shattering necessarily, but even if it's just like a pleasant 90-minute experience, I think that's... I think you need to go into a movie like this with the right expectations, I guess is my point. Even if it's just interesting and not necessarily thought-provoking, I think that's fine, you know? It's kind of a... You could consider it an experiment, I guess. This is the directorial debut for the people that are directing this movie. I think it's a set of brothers. So, like, they're kind of just trying something. And I can appreciate that outside of the realm of, like, the Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic scores and stuff. So...
Plus, there is something to be said about just, like you said, being entertained for 90 minutes. I don't think we talked about this, but we watched the, like, dumb Lindsay Lohan Christmas movie on Netflix that everybody said was, like, horrible. And, like, was it great? Absolutely not. Was it slightly better than Hallmark?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And you know what? It was 90 minutes. We weren't anticipating anything great, but it entertained us for 90 minutes and we'll never watch it again. But hey, for those 90 minutes, I got to drink wine and eat popcorn and it was okay.
Can confirm she did that.
Yeah, I think like it's very hard. Like, and by the way, we're recording this a day after the Golden Globes, and like the Golden Globes is not a topic. We're not going to talk about what won and what didn't. I mean, I guess I am right now for like a minute. But like when award season comes along and like the Golden Globes is like starting the film and television award season, I think it's always kind of a reminder to me of like, there are just two different worlds when it comes to movies. Like the two movies that won like the most awards yesterday are two movies that I just have no intention of seeing because they're like 3 hours long and like very, for lack of a better term, like artsy fartsy, like auteur movies that like maybe I'm not even intended to like.
What movie are you referring to?
I'm referring to The Brutalist and Amelia Perez. Those are the two movies that won the most awards yesterday. And in particular, I'm referring to The Brutalist because like I watched the trailer for The Brutalist. Even the trailer for that movie just is insane. The way it's shot, it just seems very, very, I don't want to say full of itself. And people are going to be so mad at me in the time off in the comments on how stupid I am, I guess.
Well, no, you're not. Because like a lot of these were pitting against like things that the public was absolutely enamored with, like Wicked, and that...
Well, right. And that's actually where I was going to go next, is like Wicked did win a Golden Globe. It won the Golden Globe for Best Cinematic Box Office Achievement, I think, which is basically the Golden Globes made an award for the normies. That's the way you can read that, which like, by the way, I'm also insulted by that. It's like, don't treat me like I'm 5. Like, if you want your award show to just be for the Hollywood people to basically, you know, circle jerk themselves, that's fine. But like, don't add an award to be like, oh, here's an award for you people that don't understand movies. It's like, I think I understand movies. I think I also just like every so often want to be entertained. So like, again, this movie to me just has me thinking about all those things of like, movies don't necessarily have to be these like, you know, insane high concept things that shatter the entire universe. They can just be, like you said, things that you sit down and watch for 90 minutes with, you know, a glass of wine and some popcorn. And like, we've talked about this before on the show, but like thinking about like a movie I watched pretty recently, not because I chose but because it was on, is a movie called You've Got Mail, which was like, it came out in like the 90s. Have you guys seen this movie?
Oh yeah, this is movie. Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks. What's crazy about this is if you plopped this in the hands of somebody born in the last like 15 years, they'd have no idea what the reference for the title was, and that makes me feel so old, but it was a good movie. It's
a movie that, yeah, I think it's a fine movie. It's a movie that I've watched a couple of times. It's a movie that would never come out today.
Does it still hold up?
Good question. It's a mixed bag. I was kind of in and out of watching it. I was in the middle of doing something else. But like, it's actually a remake of a really old movie starring like Jimmy Stewart called The Shop Around the Corner, which I think is based on a book. Like it's just one of those like classic stories. So like elements of it certainly hold up, and those elements get carried through generations. Like they might make a remake of it at some point, but I think a movie like that, it doesn't come out with these huge intentions, right? It doesn't come out with the intention to either smash at the box office or like win a bunch of Oscars. It just comes out because like it's a story that someone wanted to tell, and it was decided that it was commercially viable enough to put it out. And again, not necessarily blow the doors off the box office, but like make its money back and do okay. And like that is just never the goal. these days.
I wish movies were a lot more like books and video games, because I feel like the barrier to entry for publishing a book or a video game, especially with the indie publishing scene in both of those industries, it's just so much more accessible. And if you're a movie maker, you know, whether you're an actor or a writer or a director, the barrier to entry for making your own movie that doesn't look like a janky POS that you shot on your cell phone is just so high. And I really feel for those people.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be a filmmaker. That's just not my bag. But like, if I wanted to write a book, I may never get picked up by a big publisher. And I mean, I have written a book, and I don't have to worry about the daunting prospect of then trying to put myself out there and get funding for it. I can just pop it on a self-publishing thing and get going.
Yeah. No, I think like, and we're vamping at this point. Sorry to the listeners, I guess. But
it's
like
the new year, we got to vamp.
The iPhone, in particular, some of the last few renditions of the iPhone, I know that like when they come out, and the camera is of course better because the camera's always improved with each, you know, successive generation of the iPhone. Like they are always touting like you could film a feature-length movie. Like there's commercials that like show filmmakers using it, right? But that's not reality. Like it may be technically possible, but also it's kind of not, again, commercially possible. And I agree with you, the barrier to entry is sky high, and that is unfortunate. Like I think you could argue that the barrier to entry to writing a movie is the same. You write a script and you think it's really good, and then you shop it around. But like if you're a filmmaker who wants to shoot something and has a actual, you know, visual vision of what it should look like, that's a lot more challenging, right? Because you need financing, and unless you're like M. Night Shyamalan, who now like finances his movies himself, I believe. Like there are very few people who just are afforded the ability to do that, obviously. Anyways, Love Me comes out on January 31st of this year. This strikes me as something that's going to hit streaming really, really fast. Not that many things don't hit streaming really, really fast these days, but I imagine we'll get a theatrical release, but I can't really imagine it making much more than a blip on the old radar in that respect. If I were to watch this, it's definitely something I would watch at home. I'm not sure there's a super specific reason to go to the theater for this, so I probably won't. Where do you guys land on this one?
I mean, I'm definitely going to watch it when it hits a cheap enough, you know, cost on streaming, whether that's free or, you know, this is a pro tip. Again, I don't know how you feel about Amazon, but if you have Prime, and I've started to realize in most cases I don't need things the next day. I'm exercising patience and restraint, and then they just give you free digital credits, and they rack up really quickly. So I don't think we've paid to rent a movie. If I'm too impatient to wait for it to come to like one of the streaming services we already have, I don't think we've paid to rent a movie in a while.
That is a good tip. I did watch Wicked over the weekend, which I will get to. I'm in my What Are You Up To? And granted, I didn't watch all of it. I watched like the first hour of it and I fell asleep. So that's kind of my review right away. But it cost like $20 to rent. Like it was insane. So that is definitely a good pro tip. So yeah, let's move on to video games. Our second two topics are both video game centric. We're going to start with the Nintendo Switch 2, which we've kind of been dipping in and out of news topics associated with that for the past few months. The latest is particularly interesting. Images, or purportedly, this is all alleged. Let me start by saying that. I mean, we're getting this from IGN, but IGN is getting it from Reddit and so on and so forth. Now, we got some photos of the new Joy-Con, and this being an audio medium, I can't really show you what those look like, but I can describe them to you. What I will say is that, but for one like supposed feature, they kind of look very similar to what the existing Joy-Con looks like. The SL and SR buttons do look larger, but the big thing that I can see as being notably different, or like what people are supposing certain optical sensors are, it looks like you might be able to use it as a mouse. There's an optical sensor like you would see on the bottom of a computer mouse, and some people are suggesting that kind of pad-looking thing on the top of it is a glide pad that allows you to move it around. There's actually a video on Reddit that someone posted of the existing Joy-Con to basically see what it would look like to use it as a mouse. You basically just move it around like a mouse, and the trigger on whatever Joy-Con you have basically acts as basically the mouse click. This was very interesting for me to, I guess, read and look at, in the sense that I would have never thought to like just orient a Joy-Con that way and like put it down and use it like a mouse. But as the video shows, it does seem like a fairly natural transition. So I guess to start with,
I would never do this. Sorry.
Well, hang on.
We're going based on, again, an image and people supposing that that's what the optical sensor is for. Do you guys buy that as a potential application?
I buy it for two reasons. One, it allows them to open up maybe a Nintendo store that does point and click type PC games, and there's profitability to be had there. And two, do you guys remember the Nintendo Labo?
Yeah.
I do.
By adding a sensor there, this adds another sliding type mechanism that you can include in some kind of interactive kits. I mean, that's where these Joy-Cons come into play, is their motion capability. You add a sensor, you're adding a dimension.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure if they're going to the trouble of adding this feature to the controller, they have some very clear and direct ideas about what they want it to be used for. I think point and click as a genre is already perfectly possible on the Switch. So like, I don't know that that's necessarily what I would hone in on as like their targeted use case. But, it may be that they want to get more aggressive about how they handle shooters. And like, how many shooting games do you know that are basically mouse driven in terms of where you aim and where you shoot? Like, that's the genre that I would suppose that they might be targeting. But maybe they're not targeting a specific genre at all. Maybe they just want to add the capability generally and let, their game developers go and do creative things with it, within like the Mario franchise or Luigi's Mansion or something like that. It's certainly very interesting to speculate. I should say, like, kind of, again, not focusing for a second, not on the like potential mouse usage. They look exactly the same. And like, I don't think like as the current Joy-Cons, I don't think anyone was necessarily suspecting some giant departure in terms of form factor with the Switch 2, but to me this is the strongest confirmation we've gotten yet that like it's kind of like pretty much the same. And to be clear, I have no problem with that. Like, I think that's totally fine. So yeah, I don't know. This is again, we don't even know when the Switch 2 is being formally announced. Leaks are going to keep coming, and again, we don't even know for sure that this is a legitimate leak. It certainly seems to be fairly legitimate, but
it feels like the Switch 2 announcement has to be fairly imminent based on how many leaks we've been getting lately. Because I think, wasn't the motherboard also leaked like last week or the week before? There's been too much. I feel like it's got to be coming soon. Although we said that last year, so who knows?
The console is apparently not going to arrive. They're not going to launch during Nintendo's current financial year, so the earliest it would launch would be April 2025. I agree with you, though, that I think that, it says right here, Nintendo has said it will announce the Switch 2 by the end of March 2025. So this spring, we will get more concrete details about what exactly it's going to be doing and providing. I will say, speaking more broadly about my gaming habits these days, it's very Switch heavy. So like, I'm not necessarily going to go out and buy a Switch 2 right away. My hope for the Switch 2 outside of its capability is that it's not, a $600 thing like the PS5 was. Maybe that may be a fool's hope, but like, I think if the barrier to entry was suitably lowered, I would be much more likely to actually shell out the money and purchase it. So not that Nintendo cares about some punk like me, but that's kind of my 2 cents on it. I mean, where are you guys at with the Switch 2 without knowing exactly what it's going to be? And I guess maybe taking this Joy-Con design into account, like, is it something that you're going to be looking to get fairly soon after its launch, or are you in wait and see mode?
So hear me out. We buy every console. We're sluts for a console.
We're sluts.
But specifically for the Nintendo Switch, we have been holding off on buying another docking station. And from what I understand, from what has been leaked at least, the Switch 2 will be backwards compatible with most of your Switch games. I'm assuming things like the Ring Fit Adventure, those peripherals won't work with the new Joy-Cons, which I totally understand, because those have like the rail system. So understand that. But that aside, it feels like everything else should work with the Switch 2. So I feel like it might be in our future. It really depends on what games they have coming out for it. Techtic is the big Switch guy, so if there's something that really knocks the socks off, I've driven the bus on so many of our other console purchases that I would let him have free reign over that one. Techtic, what would have to be the software launch title that would get you to buy it immediately?
None of them.
No, not a new Pokemon, not a new Zelda game, not a new Metroid, like none of them? Nothing could get you to invest in the Switch 2?
When she says that we're console sluts, what she really means is she's a console slut and I'm a down-ass bitch.
But you like the Switch. Like, that is your home console.
I love playing it, but it takes a lot for me to get on board to buy a new console. It's your happiness that gets me there.
Duh.
Obviously my concern, which at this point I think is extremely valid, is that Prime 4 is going to be a Switch 2 release title. And for me, that would certainly change things. Yeah, that would change things. certainly in the direction of me buying it sooner rather than later. But again, it's just going to depend on how much it costs. Like if it's a $600 thing, like that's going to take a lot for me to get on board with it. And at this point, all I can really do is just hope that it's not. So we'll be on the lookout. Again, it seems like this spring we're going to get some more concrete technical detail on what the Switch 2 is. But until then, we are just waiting in the wings. We're going to take a little break here and wait a little bit longer to get back to the rest of the episode. Before we get back to the episode and before we take our break, I would be remiss if I didn't, for the first time in 2025, acknowledge the efforts and the virtues and the values of our fantastic Patreon producer, Mr. Stephen Keller. Stephen's been supporting the show for quite a while now at the highest of our 3 levels of Patreon support, which is the night level. And as a result, he is a producer on this show. He gets the weekly shout out right here where I'm doing it. He, of course, gets access to the monthly secret segment and vlog, input into the game segment every week, and the occasional guest spot on the show. There is also a Squire level of support, which gets you access to the monthly secret segment and vlog, and a page level, which gets you access to the monthly secret segment. You can head over to patreon.com/onlinewarriorspodcast. Check out all the details on any and all of those levels of support. Say hi to Steven. Say hi to us. Consider keeping the mics on, helping us keep this thing going, and getting involved with the production of this show. So again, patreon.com/onlinewarriorspodcast is where you can find the deets on that. Thanks again to Steven. We will be right back to talk about PlayStation's old IPs.
Welcome aboard Too Vague Airlines. We're cruising here at 40,000 feet. That might be too many feet, but what do I know? I'm not really an airplane. I'm a podcaster. Actually, I'm a co-podcaster. I'm the co-host of several episodes of the Too Vague podcast. If you haven't heard it, you're missing out. Check out the Too Vague podcast. Any place podcasts do whatever they do.
Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned off the fasten seatbelt sign. For your continued safety, Too Vague Airlines requires that you keep your seatbelt fastened at all times while seated. But while you're seated, you can tune into the Too Vague podcast, TWOVAGUE, on your favorite podcast services and enjoy the flight.
Okay, we are back to talk about PlayStation. We just talked about Nintendo. It's time to talk a little bit about Sony. So we all know that Astro Bot was a big deal this year. You guys I know played it, and I believe it won Game of the Year? ? My memory's not good.
It won Game of the Year in my heart.
Aww.
But one of the potentially powerful things about it was that it really just grabbed a bunch of old IPs and kind of conglomerated a bunch of them, at least with little winks or nods, in this one game, Astrobot. And I think it reminded people of how many great IPs Sony has access to, and what they could potentially do with them, what they could bring back, what's been gone for a while. I find this conversation very interesting, in particular because we're living in an age of media right now where nothing is good unless it can spawn a franchise or be a franchise, right? And I know that's more so true in movies, but I imagine in games it's also occasionally true, especially with AAA, build the titles, right? The thing is, like, Sony already has a bunch in the chamber. Like, they had Sly Cooper, they had Jak and Daxter. Both franchises, by the way, I've never played. Like, I wasn't a PlayStation kid, so
do you have PlayStation
I'm relatively
Plus?
new to the landscape. I don't have PlayStation Plus,
because
so I don't have a way to access them. I know they're there.
Sly Cooper, I believe, was just added and is so good. I mean, I'm pretty sure you can just buy the Jak collection now, and it's not super expensive. You can get it on PlayStation, and it is quite a good platformer.
I always mix up Jak and Daxter with Ratchet and Clank, which maybe isn't fair. It's maybe not fair, but it's just because it's it's like name and name. I'm like, oh, they're the same thing, which I know isn't fair. But I kind of, where I'm going with this, I kind of want to defer to you guys here. I mean, I think the idea is generally good. So the vague report here is that Sony is working on revisiting old IPs, and it's not clear what those would be. But looking at what they have in the stable, like, it was referred to as quote unquote deep cut old IP stuff. So some titles that have been brought up: Sly Cooper, Jak and Daxter, Ape Escape, Gravity Rush. The one that the biggest touch point for me is Twisted Metal, but I guess Twisted Metal had a recent live service entry that was canceled. Now, live service we've talked about a bunch as like maybe not being as viable as companies seem to think it is.
But they also had the TV show, which was actually very successful and very good. If you have not watched the Twisted Metal TV show, I think it's on Peacock. I was surprised. It has Anthony Mackie in it and Rosa from Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yeah,
can't remember.
Something
Stephanie
Beatrice.
That was actually a phenomenal show, and I'm surprised they didn't have a game ready to go with that just because it was so good. And I feel like it got a lot of people invested in the IP for the first time in a while.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they may have intended to, but again, it was a live service entry, so like I don't know how that would have tied in with the show necessarily. I guess, I did pick this topic, but I kind of just picked it because I like the idea of old IPs coming back. Now, for me, PlayStation old IPs are just kind of dark arts. I don't know much about them. I guess deferring to you guys, like, what is an old PlayStation IP? Because I think you guys were both PlayStation kids.
Yes.
I could be wrong. What do you want to see back that
Spyro
has been gone for a while? So Spyro's not mentioned, but that's, what we're talking about, I think, are a lot of platformers.
Well,
and to me, Spyro was a game
Don't they own Spyro now?
I have no idea.
Well, they ain't doing anything with it. Bring them back.
I mean, they just had the remastered trilogy.
Whenever I sing
Spyro,
Fire and Vice, neither ain't so nice, not to mention troubles with sparks and bubbles. No one knows what I'm saying.
Spyro is a game that, or I guess a game franchise that I was always jealous of not being able to play when I was a kid. Like, it was, again, being a one console family of like, we were a Nintendo family, I would just kind of look over at Spyro and be like, oh, that looks fun, but I'll just never get to play it. It is currently owned by Activision. The franchise is owned by Activision, so probably doesn't apply here necessarily, but nevertheless, Techtic, the spirit of the question was answered. They did have a reignited trilogy in 2018, which I'm sure I did have a chance to play, and I just didn't play it. So Sly Cooper, I guess, does he steal stuff?
Sly Cooper is a thief, but the way that the games are structured, so you play a thief, it's a platformer, but it's very like old-timey noir with cel-shading art style, and it was fantastic. The humor and dialogue and writing in the game, top-notch. The puzzles that you solved, top-notch. The, combat, everything. I loved Sly Cooper.
I always thought that game seemed too mature for me.
I don't, maybe it was, but when I was a kid, I thought it was great. They even, at one point, they had Sly Cooper 3 was 3D, and it shipped with a pair of 3D glasses. And that was swell. Like, it was just such a good franchise, and I don't know why it's been just sitting in the dark for so long. That and Jak and Daxter. And Jak and Daxter, I mean, I get they moved on. Naughty Dog went to make other games. I get it. But the IP should not be this dead for this long. I feel like it was such a good platforming entry point, and from how much people love Astro Bot and Sackboy, dude, people yearn for the platformers. They yearn for them.
I said this, and I feel like I'm always on the cutting edge of what the people want. When I was talking Metroidvanias, and now when I'm talking platformers, I agree. You couldn't be more right.
But I mean, there's even stuff like Infamous, which Techtic, I don't know if you played that. We do have one of the Infamous games. I feel like it would be akin to a game that you really liked back in the day, Prototype, that you played the heck out of.
Prototype 1.
But that franchise has been sitting dormant. It's kind of crazy how much they're just sitting on at this point. Even like God of War, they let go dormant for a really long time. And if you look at the treatment there, we can see what they can do with these IPs. They bring them back, and they bring them back better than ever, make them super relevant, do that to all of the old franchises that I love. Because part of it's nostalgia, but think about how many new people were introduced to God of War. I had never played a God of War game. You had never played a God of War game, I don't think. And yet here we are.
Correct.
Big God of War lovers.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that one of the broader questions here, and God of War doesn't necessarily fit into this category, but like so many of the games that you just talked about are ostensibly platformers, and like Astro Bot, definitely a platformer. Like, maybe the conversation being had at Sony right now is, hey, Nintendo has always done platformers so well, and they just continue to do platformers forever. It's like one of their core genres. Like, can we cut into that market by bringing back some of these games? We just did Astro Bot. We saw that it was super successful and worked really well. So what more can we do there with IP that we already have? Like, I think that's the right question to be asking, and where they go with that, I would say I'm not even sure it matters very much. Like, if they were to pick one of these, I don't know the extent to which it even matters which one they pick. They should just pick one, and like you said, give it a nice new coat of paint like they did with God of War, which again, God of War, I don't think I would call it a platformer necessarily, but like that's a good example of a game that was essentially dusted off and it has good bones in terms of IP and story, and they just kind of gave it a fresh coat of paint. They could pick any one of these and do that same thing, and I think they should. So again, not exactly a new story. This is again very leaky, so not much in the sense of like specifics, but let us know on the old Blue Sky machine what IP you want brought back. Maybe it was one of the ones we mentioned, maybe it was one of the ones we didn't. You can let us know. I am at OWLegal86.bsky.social. We have at OWNerdbomber.bsky.social, at Techtic.bsky.social, and at OnlineWarriors.bsky.social. That last one being our main show account over on Blue Sky. We're basically off X, so you shouldn't even bother over there.
And also, before we pivot, just quick, we don't have to discuss this, but just some quick breaking news out of CES, because this is relevant to the topic we were just talking about. Sony and Columbia Pictures have announced that Horizon Zero Dawn will be getting a movie, Helldivers 2 will be getting a movie, and Ghost of Tsushima will be getting an anime adaptation.
Helldivers 2 will be getting a movie, even though there's no Helldivers 1 movie.
Correct.
So it'll probably just be called Helldivers, I would think, but that might confuse some people. That's my immediate feedback. Horizon makes perfect sense. That should have probably happened a couple of years ago, to be honest. Nevertheless, very exciting. I just talked to someone over the weekend who had just started watching The Last of Us and was like, "Wow, this is amazing," and they'd never played the game. Like, I really do think there's just a shift happening in media right now that is like, hey, video games can really like make good stories, and like we can use that for film and television. And I think that's just great, and it's probably going to keep happening. So great time to be a gamer. Which brings me to what are you up to Wednesday? And it's a good segue for me to talk about what I've been up to. One of the main things being, I mentioned before, I watched Wicked. I fell asleep after an hour. Not because it wasn't good. Like, it seemed fine. High production value. I didn't like the music. I'd never seen the stage show, so like I really had no skin in the game going in. My broader point with Wicked,
no spoilers.
Which okay. If there's no spoilers, I won't get into it. We should talk about it when you guys have seen the movie. I have some things I could say about it. It seemed fine. It just didn't hold my attention, and I was really tired, so I fell asleep. The main thing I want to talk about in my What Are You Up To Wednesday is Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, which is a game that I know for a fact we talked about it on the podcast because that's where it first got on my radar. It probably would have been a year or more ago that we did talk about it. But this is a story-driven puzzle game from Annapurna Interactive, so it was before before what happened to them. I think developed by a studio called Simogo Entertainment, a very small studio, actually a 2-person studio. I did some Googling after the fact. And this is a game that it has some horror elements, although it's really just, there's no jump scares or anything. It's more so a mystery. It's very puzzle driven. It's very story driven. There's a lot of nonlinear time jumps. There's a story that takes place over multiple centuries. And there's a lot of very, very cool puzzles to be solved. And altogether, I think I probably put in 8 or 9 hours. Like, it's not a very long game, but super, super satisfying. As of right now, I played it on the Switch. I think I got it for $20. Hopefully you can get it for about that. And it is worth every single penny. Can't recommend that game enough. I know it's January, but early game of the year contender for me because in my mind, it was basically perfect. So shout out to that game. Loved it so much. And I will then turn things over to Nerdbomber to take us through her past week in the life.
All right. So we started playing Balatro, but I'm going to leave Techtic to talk about that because I know he was really jazzed about that. But we also watched Fly Me to the Moon, which I think it was out in theaters over the summer, and then now it's finally on Apple TV Plus. If you have that, it's included for free with your plan. It's the movie with Scarlett Johansson and Channing Tatum about the Apollo 11 mission.
Yeah.
And how Scarlett Johansson's character, this is all fictional, it's also got Woody Harrelson in it, but Scarlett Johansson's character is kind of a shisty advertiser. She kind of lies and connives her way to getting advertising contracts and selling things, and she's really good at talking people into buying things that maybe they don't need. And so Woody Harrelson works for the president. She's got like a shady background, so he comes to her and basically is like, you're going to do this job because you're the best marketer around, and in exchange we'll wipe your record, and hires her to basically pump up the NASA program so that Congress will vote to give them funding. And Channing Tatum plays astronaut / flight director for the mission. So he's kind of overseeing everything, and they kind of butt heads a little bit because he wants to focus on, the mission and building the ship and everything like that and making sure everything is technically sound and safe. And she's, pulling the astronauts away for marketing campaigns and basically just being disruptive to the mission as she's trying to get money. Obviously, it's also a little bit of a rom-com, so they have a little, will they, won't they situation going on throughout the entire movie. They've got some like banter, chemistry kind of stuff. And then it gets to a point, and they show this in the trailer, so this is not a spoiler, but it gets to a point where Woody Harrelson's character, the shady government guy, comes to her and asks her to construct a second setting so that they can film a moon landing in case the Apollo mission does not go correctly. And I'll leave you there. That is the premise of the movie. I won't give anything else away. But it was entertaining. It was a little long. It ran just over 2 hours. I think it probably could have been condensed a little bit, but it was entertaining. It was definitely more of a comedy. It was funny and light, and that's kind of what we wanted.
I don't think you feel the length in this one. I don't think it feels like it drags out, so I don't want to call that a negative necessarily.
I think there's just so much going on because you're introduced to the characters. Ray Romano is also in this. I forgot he was in this as well. There's a lot of, we're both space nerds, so I really loved how they were digging into just like the stuff that goes into the engineering. They didn't obviously get super technical, but just touching on the stuff that they were doing to prepare for the mission, I thought was really, I don't know. I feel like you don't get a lot of that lately. I think the last movie I watched that was sort of space theme like that was Hidden Figures. And I feel like the space exploration era is just such a ripe film topic to mine. And we haven't since Armageddon. It just hasn't been a thing really. And I don't know why. So it was enjoyable. It was light.
Yeah,
it was not serious. It was good. It wasn't like knock my socks off. I don't know if I would remember it moving forward. Would never watch it again. But for the 2 hours that it had us, I enjoyed myself.
Yeah, I think in particular the factual, like you said, like Hidden Figures, and it sounds like this movie, and obviously Apollo 13 being like the gold standard. Like I definitely agree. Like there's room for fictional, but also very technically proficient movies like The Martian that talk about space, but I think there's probably a lot of unmined stuff in like the NASA in the 60s, like what they were doing and First Man is another example, I guess, but there's still a lot more stories to be told there, I think.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Right on. Does that leave us with my guy Techtic?
Balatro Boy.
Before
I get into Balatro,
the floor is yours.
I want to talk about another movie we watched, and that was The Holdovers. This was
love this movie so
fantastic.
much.
I didn't know what to expect. I thought it was going to be like a downer or like overly artsy, and like I didn't want to take the 90 some odd percent on Rotten Tomato as at face value. I just wanted to enjoy it and take it in for what it was, and it didn't. It had everything. It was an emotional roller coaster. You felt for the characters. It had laughs along the way. This was such a feel good movie when you feel like you shouldn't feel good, if that makes sense.
He was off-put by the style of the movie. You know how
I was not. I thought it was intriguing.
Oh, see, you were like, oh, they're going to do this artsy stuff.
That's what oh, yeah. Before watching it, I was afraid they were going to do it over the top with like the grainy camera footage, but it was a period piece and it was done well.
Yeah, I mean, this movie, I meant to watch it this year around Christmas because ostensibly it's a Christmas movie. I didn't get around to it, but
I didn't spoil it.
It's a movie that, no, you didn't. I've seen it already, I guess. I saw it 2 years ago, and I meant to watch it again this Christmas because I wanted to get into my every year rotation. It's a brilliant movie, and it's a movie that I think, counter to what I was saying earlier about the Golden Globes and like award-winning movies maybe not necessarily accessing a mainstream audience. Like this is one of those movies that managed to do both. Like I think it won a bunch of awards, it deserved to win, and it also just like really effectively told a very moving story. And as a result, it really deserves to, like I said, be in an annual rotation. So I'm glad you liked it.
I love movies where you find friendship in like unexpected places. It's excellent.
Great movie.
Oh, and Balatro. It's good.
Word.
That's it.
I mean, you guys already gushed about it enough. The listeners know.
I have certainly gushed about it quite a bit in 2024. So if you want, we can leave it there. I hope you're enjoying it, but it's good.
I did, and Nerdbomber has played it. She introduced me to it.
Yeah, I was playing it, and he was like, that looks dumb. And then I was like, you're going to play this. And then he played it, and he was like, he lost after, I think, 3 or 4 blinds, and he was like, this is dumb. I'm going to try it again, though. And then played until 3 a.m.
It gets you with the competitive edge.
Then we woke up, and we had somewhere to be the next day, and he was like, so, do we have like half an hour to play Balatro? And I was like, no, we don't. And then we got home from that activity and stayed up till 2 a.m. again because he was playing Balatro.
It's addicting. I mean, yeah, I what I meant before, I guess, I don't think Nerdbomber's talked about her experience on the podcast yet, but I talked about it a bunch. So like people should kind of understand what the gist of it is. But yeah, it is like, I would say toxically addicting. So based on recent experience of my own, I would say just be careful. Because you'll get lost in that game, man. It's just, it's perfect in the sense that it's just so, again, just, I can't say it any other way. It's addicting. So happy for you that you're undergoing that experience right now. That brings us to Quiz Town. And this is a very special edition of Quiz Town in the sense that we are all back to even keel. It is now 0-0 all across the board. I will be hosting this first rendition of the quiz in 2025, if only because I was the last winner in 2024. And the topic, well, maybe was a little bit more holiday oriented, I think holds up at this point. And that topic is Yankee Candle. You know Yankee Candle, you've walked by it, you know, in like malls or wherever, probably like many times. Maybe you go in there, you smell all the candles and you don't buy any, and the salesperson gives you a dirty look as you're walking out. You know what I'm talking about. The usual here, I got 5 questions and a tiebreaker, all of which are numerical, so we'll just kind of dive right into it here. If only because Techtic lost in 2024, I'm going to have Nerdbomber go first to give him the slight advantage. So Nerdbomber, this first question will be answered by you first. It is a simple one. In what year was Yankee Candle founded?
I mean, I would say probably after the founding of the Americas to get the word Yankee from.
That's a good point.
I'm going to need a more specific answer.
I understand. I'm thinking, how vintage is Yankee Candle? I'm going to say like 1830. It's been around for a dumb amount of time. It's just been like modernized and capitalized.
+1.
Boo.
Yeah, it was actually 1969.
Really? Not that old?
Nice.
Much later than you would think. It was originally just a single guy who was he made the candle as a Christmas gift for his mom or something, and then they started mass producing them because the candle was such a hit. So it kind of just blossomed. How does
giving
there.
A gift to your mom was his mom like, wow, this is really cool, and he's like, I'm gonna go right into mass production.
Well, I wonder if people came over and they'd be like, man, that candle smells dank, and then he was like, I can hook you up.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the whole story, but I believe it was something like that. So, Techtic, you are first on the board with your good use of a +1. From small beginnings, in 2013, they were purchased by the Jarden Corporation. How much were they purchased for?
I'm going to say a cool Billy.
Nerdbomber.
What year was it again?
2013.
So not that long ago. I'm going to say 10 billion.
Techtic, a strong start to 2025. It was 1.75.
Oh,
billion.
I had no chance. Okay.
Yeah, he was pretty close. Jarden also owned. They actually have since gone under, but they owned the Coleman Company, Sunbeam Products, Mr. Coffee, many other well-known consumer brands. For what it's worth, Yankee Candle has since been purchased by other companies, but the details of those purchases have not been made super public, so I couldn't come up with the numbers for them. So, moving right along, Nerdbomber, you're on the ropes, so you got to dig in here. According to the company profile on their website, how many stores do they have?
1,000.
Holy smokes, it's way more than that. I feel like there's like 3 in a single shopping mall. I'm going to say 25,000.
Now, here's the thing. There are over 14,000 retailers in the U.S., but they are not necessarily Yankee Candle stores. Their company profile on their website says 300 company-owned stores. So it's actually quite a bit less than you would think. So both of you busted. Staying on this company profile on their website, another interesting question. How many fragrances do they produce?
272 unique fragrances.
That feels like too many. I'm going to use my 1 on this one.
So not a +1.
No, just the number 1.
Right on. Techtic takes it home.
Oh, come on.
There are, it says over 600 actually, but the number I was looking for was 600.
There's not even that many smells in the world.
Yeah, like home.
Yankee Candle would beg to differ. So this last question is just for fun. Techtic, congratulations. But the second of its 2 flagship stores was opened in Williamsburg, Virginia in 2005.
That's right.
How many square feet was this store? Like, how big was it?
This was a small little 500 square foot store.
I'm going to say it was 200 square feet.
Another gravy point for Techtic. Guys, square feet. I mean, a room is like 200 square feet.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be like a
45,000
room
square
somewhere.
feet.
I thought it was going to be like a scrappy startup store where it was just like a room.
It's a flagship store.
Oh, I
It's where
misheard
they
that.
ship the flags.
I misheard that. Okay, yeah, that was dumb.
45,000 square feet. Is she a big boy? Also, I should say that store, I believe, has also since been closed, but their
Because it was too
company
big.
headquarters in South Deerfield, Massachusetts is still open. Go get yourself a Yankee Candle if you got one in your house. Give it a deep sniff right
God,
now.
do I know candles.
Just Techtic Candle Expert moves to 1-0 on the year and officially into the lead position. Nerdbomber to 0-1, and Techtic will host our quiz next week, in which Nerdbomber and myself go
New year,
head to
new
head.
me.
New year, new Techtic. His punishment is TBD. We will get back to you about that probably next week, because I'm sure you're all waiting with bated breath. Thanks to all who tuned in to listen to this first episode of 2025 of the Online Warriors podcast. We were so happy to have you along for the ride. We hope you'll come back next week, whether you're a long-term listener or you've just stumbled upon the show. Super happy to have you here. You can hit us up on Blue Sky, handles mentioned previously in the episode, about anything you want from this episode or anything at all, just period. You can also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, and get out there and tell your friends that this should be their 2025 podcast. We got a big old backlog of episodes. You can go back and listen to us talk about E3 from like 2018 if you want. I'm sure it's there. So maybe that's an assignment for even people who currently listen. Anyways, we'll talk at you next week. Thanks for stopping by. Stay safe and keep on podcasting.